This week on Christian World News, the epic story of battling the world's most deadly virus comes to the big screen. We'll give you a first look at the film Facing Darkness. Plus, an entire country under the iron fist of communist rule. But see why it's become the epicenter of a revival that isn't stopping anytime soon. And it's one of the fastest growing churches in America. See how Chinese immigrants are finding a new home and a new faith.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 크리스천 월드뉴스입니다. 지난 수십 년간 쿠바는 공식적인 무신론 국가였는데요. 그러다 보니 교회에 대한 박해 문제도 심각했습니다. 하지만 현재 쿠바는 종교의 자유를 누리며 교회 부흥을 이루고 있다고 하는데요. 오늘 첫 번째 소식은 쿠바로 가봅니다.
Heather, this is really an exciting time for the church in Cuba.
It is, Wendy. It's incredible. Not only is the body of Christ growing, but churches are demonstrating remarkable unity. In this evangelism campaign that just finished, over 300 churches from 30-some denominations came together and connected with 55,000 people. We traveled to Cuba in 2015 and found a vibrant church that is using simple tools to share the message of Christ.
In recent years, Cuban churches have become known for incredible growth in the midst of poverty and an oppressive regime. Pastor Nestor is typical. He lives in a two-room apartment with his wife. His church meets in a classroom-sized room where the congregation overflows.
One of the things that has made us grow in faith has been the limitations and the difficulties.
In response to building restrictions, Cuban Baptists and Assemblies of God churches have seen house churches take off. And in the midst of scarce resources, a hunger for the gospel is evident across the island. It's why churches typically pack out on Sunday mornings.
People here don't care how comfortable they are. They could be exhausted from working all day and they will sit on a bag of rocks, a stitched-up chair, or stand the whole service, and they're okay with that.
Under the presidency of Raul Castro, restrictions on churches have relaxed slightly. They can now more easily hold public events and evangelize. The Cuban exile and humanitarian Teo Baboon says Fidel Castro's death could open up more opportunities, noting that the dictator crushed religious freedom. Castro was known for exiling believers and banning public displays of faith. His brother, Raul, is known more for his pragmatism and is considered less antagonistic towards the church.
We hope that the Cuban government feels freer to move more progressively towards religious freedoms.
But there's also fear that Raul Castro will roll back some of the new freedoms to prevent anyone from taking advantage of his brother's death. And there's concern that under the new Trump administration, travel to Cuba will tighten up again.
That could slow down a growing partnership between U.S. and Cuban churches. Southern Baptist missions expert Jason Carlisle says improved U.S. relations with Cuba have encouraged missions.
Any leader who's excited, who's trying to find where to be involved in the world or how to take his church to an exciting piece of Christianity, they think of Cuba.
For now, Cuban pastors and U.S. mission leaders are cautious and yet optimistic, as the Cuban church has already proved that it can not only survive but flourish under tough conditions.
A new report from the Associated Press says the fastest growing church in Cuba right now is the Assemblies of God. In about 25 years, the Assemblies of God have grown from around 10,000 members to some 120,000 today. And there are also about 100,000 Baptists and 40,000 Methodists, all in a nation that once outlawed faith, Wendy.
Heather, Cuba is still pretty much a poor nation by all standards. How is the church managing to grow in the midst of this poverty?
What I love is they use a very simple model, and it's really an example for all of us. They are encouraging people to simply share their testimonies. So someone becomes a believer, and they're encouraged to share with their neighbor, their coworker, this is my experience, this is what Jesus has meant to me. And so they are just using basic methods that we can find in the New Testament Testament, and the church is flourishing. It's also interesting, house churches are really growing in Cuba, and that's because of a government restriction. So something that was originally thought of as a negative has turned into a positive, and these house churches are just multiplying like crazy on the island right now.
The head of the Council of Churches in Cuba recently told the Associated Press there is religious freedom in Cuba. Do you think that's correct?
I think it's very interesting that they are saying that. I'm not quite sure why they are saying that right now. And I would definitely say it's a mixed bag. Cuban believers are very careful to say, hey, we're not being persecuted. But do they have a lot of restrictions to work around? Yes, they do. That story alluded to building restrictions. There's also some restrictions as to events that they can have in public. So they are definitely having to be careful about how they conduct themselves. But persecuted, most of them would say that's too heavy a word.
Well, lastly, how significant do you think this evangelism campaign that just took place is?
A lot of people are really excited about it. They're excited because the churches came together. They're excited because 55,000 people wanted a book of Cuban testimony. So a lot of good stuff coming out of that campaign, Wendy.
All right, very exciting. Thanks so much for your great reporting, Heather.
필리핀에서는 잔혹한 방식으로 마약과의 전쟁을 치르고 있는 두테르테 대통령에 대한 비난 여론이 커지고 있습니다. 교회들도 나섰는데요. 필리핀에서 전혜연 소식입니다.
On the 700 Club Asia program in Manila, Pastor Emil Ibanez painfully described the horrific condition of his son's body, who was victimized in an extrajudicial killing.
A wire was tied around his neck. Duct tape covered his face, his hands tied at his back, and there was a very big slash in his neck. It was so big. That was when I broke down. Why did they treat my son like an animal?
Pastor Ibanez admits his son AJ was a drug user, but says he quit drugs and became a police informant just weeks before his death. AJ is among 8,000 people who have died since Philippine President Duterte began his war on drugs 7 months ago. Most of the alleged drug users and pushers were denied due process. A creeping culture of impunity in the society has prompted the Catholic Church to issue a rare pastoral letter condemning the rising death toll. Catholic leaders called the government's drug war approach a reign of terror aimed largely at the poor.
And the Catholic Church, of course, believing in the gift of life of each and every Filipino, directly confronts the incident happening now. How to speak and how to get out of the fear that is being planted because of what's happening in the country.
Linda fears for her life. She says 5 of her drug-dealing friends surrendered to authorities but were still killed. She says poor people like them should also be given a chance to change and have a new life.
Poverty is one of the main reasons why these men and women are resorting to selling drugs as their source of income, and this is why the church and human rights groups are calling out to the government to resort to more dignified means of solving the drug problem, which is providing basic needs such as education and livelihood programs.
Friends in the police and military are helping Pastor Ibanez solve his son's case. The pastor believes God is using his son's death as a wake-up call to all Filipinos
that we should repent as a nation and come together to put a stop to the extrajudicial killings, because this kind of evil only begets evil. What has happened to my son has inspired me to be more active in the ministry that teaches values formation to policemen, who in turn teach values to students.
Let's give a chance to the pushers and the users, because we believe that everybody can change, and that is the same thing that we believe that the president can do. That's what we have been praying for, that President Duterte really changed the way he's running the drug war.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Manila.
지난 2014년 여름이죠. 아프리카 서부 지역에 에볼라 바이러스가 퍼지면서 수만 명이 목숨을 잃었습니다. 하지만 몇 주에 걸쳐 이 전염병과 맞서 싸운 이들이 있었는데요. 사마리아인의 지갑이라는 이름을 가지고 있는 선교단체의 의사와 간호사들이었습니다. 이들의 이야기 함께 만나러 가보시죠.
This was an unfolding catastrophe.
The numbers of new cases and deaths are still rising.
It's a disease that killed nearly 30,000 people over the course of 2 years. Now, a gripping new documentary tells the miraculous story of the American missionaries who fought the Ebola outbreak in Liberia and contracted the illness.
I remember just getting on the floor and praying, oh God, it's not too much for you to save his life. Will you save it?
It's certainly clear in the film this was a difficult time for your ministry. Why share this story on film?
So many people that were involved in fighting Ebola there in Liberia and Guinea and Sierra Leone were young people. And I want the world to see what God did and how he used the lives of young people to fight the world's most deadly virus. My phone rang, and Ken Isaacs said one of our doctors, Kent Brantley, has Ebola.
Through interviews with the team on the ground, Facing Darkness shows the raw, emotional journey of American medical workers fighting a deadly epidemic and the miracle it took to save their lives.
This is a story how God saved Dr. Brantley. But yet I want another generation to see it, and I want young people to see it, because God can use their lives. And I want them to know God needs them and wants to use them if they're willing to trust him.
To be honest, not a day goes by that I don't think about Liberia and about our experience.
Dr. Kent Brantley says while it's a bit uncomfortable seeing himself on the big screen, this allows him to remember God's faithfulness.
I think there's a reason that God told the people of Israel, tell your children we were slaves in Egypt. I think there's something really important about remembering the hard times we've been through and remembering what God has done in our lives to help inform the way we move forward.
My greatest fear is that I would have to raise my kids alone.
Dr. Brantley and his wife, Amber, had already been serving in Liberia for a year when the Ebola epidemic hit. His diagnosis came just days after Amber left on a short trip with their children back home to the States.
My prayers in those days were very simple. My prayers are, God, help me to be faithful. I really think my prayer for my children in that moment when I didn't think I was going to live, my prayer was that I would be faithful, that they would have a legacy of a father who was faithful, even in his death.
Altogether, the family member that I lose, 17.
Filmmakers say the process of weaving all the stories together proved challenging.
The story of Facing Darkness is definitely an epic one. There are so many stories and so many threads. And it was really, really hard to figure out how to whittle it down. Our editor was able to find some of the most powerful sound bites and the most powerful portions of people's stories and put them together. And so we were, that's one of the ways we were able to get through that.
David looked at me and he said, "You too have Ebola."
Nurse Nancy Wright-Bowles served alongside Dr. Brantley in Liberia, and she also contracted Ebola. She hopes the film will convey to audiences a message of the importance of unity.
It's not about 2 or 3 or however many expats are in the movie. It's not about us. It's about a partnership and a working together with the people that you live with. It's living within community.
People shared a lot of candid things with us. When we interviewed them and had them share for Facing Darkness. But yet, those are things that sometimes people, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, why did I say that? But yet, that's what makes us human, and we can all relate to that. And we all, like I said earlier, we can all learn from that.
The production team hopes the film will challenge audiences.
I hope people will leave the theater asking themselves, would I be that brave? What would I do?
You don't have to look far in the news today to find places where we are faced with fear. And I think something that this film can help us do is to look at those circumstances in our lives in the world today through a different lens and say, what does it look like if we choose not to respond out of the fear we feel, but instead we have the courage to move forward in compassion.
If we're willing to put our faith and trust in God's Son, Jesus Christ, if He's in our boat, we don't have to worry about that boat sinking. He'll take us through that storm, and He did with Dr. Brantley. And I want the world to see what God did. At the same time, I'm hoping God will use this to bring up an army of young people who will say, here I am, send me.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
미국에서 가장 성장이 빠른 교회는 중국인 교회라고 합니다. 대도시부터 작은 마을에 이르기까지 젊은 중국 이민자들이 하나님을 만나 변화된 삶을 살고 있는 건데요. 함께 만나보시죠.
This reenactment shows the frustration and anger that is common in many families. Chinese American parents often find communicating with their children challenging. Yang Jie moved to the United States when she was 13. That's when the relationship with her parents became more troublesome.
The family rules are very strict. It's like everything I do successfully, I'm supposed to be that way. If I'm getting a 98, I will probably get punished.
Yang Jie had to learn to obey the rules in a hard way and couldn't quite understand why her parents treated her that way.
My father is a military member when he was younger. So the way how he was training me is like the military style.
Despite the conflict, Yang Jie never doubted her parents' love, and they encouraged her to find her passion. Gradually, she took up dancing and spent much time practicing in the studio and performing.
The biggest motivation for me to work really hard to get into the advanced class and to wear the most beautiful costume in the whole dance school. And later on, when I start to go on stage and to perform the numbers, the flowers, the big applauses, and what audience say about us became really attractive to us.
Life was good and she fell in love with Paul. Yang Jie placed the same expectation of perfection on Paul as her parents placed on her. Soon, everything changed and their relationship broke apart.
Both of us weren't talking to each other. We were mad at each other and I was waiting for her to apologize to me first. It was painful.
Their marriage and family life were about to collapse. Their daughter, Crystal, was traumatized by the constant fighting and arguments.
I get really kind of mad and kind of sad at the same time because the mad part is I don't think my dad should treat my mom like that.
In the midst of the trouble and the uncertainty, Yang Jie and Paul began to attend local Chinese church services. The pastor showed them and the other young couples how to build a strong and stable family in God's way.
And there's always new people coming in. There's always people who are looking for a community to belong in and looking for people that they can connect with. And I think as a church, we have an opportunity to reach out to them with the gospel and to introduce them to Christ, many of them who've never been part of a church before or even picked up a Bible before, and just help connect with them and help them to know Jesus.
In 2016, the United States granted almost 41,000 immigrant visas to mainland-born Chinese citizens. And a number of Chinese churches in the United States grew from 1,200 in 2006 to 1,600 by 2011. Some churches are coming together to more effectively reach young Chinese.
We're working with people in our church and other churches. There's 4 Chinese churches in the Hampton Roads area who are all working to reach this community, some in different ways. And we also partner with other local American churches as well. And we're part of a local church network that supports us and connects us with other church leaders and ministries. And we all basically partner together to reach the Chinese community and to really bring the gospel to that group.
Gradually, Yang Jie and her husband found their purpose as a couple, and their marriage was healed.
Praying is like the daily spiritual just breathing, the air that we need every day. And reading the Bible, studying the Bible, is like the food we intake every day.
Crystal was happy that Jesus restored her parents' marriage and brought peace to the family and special meaning to her.
Lord and glory and thankfulness.
Today, Jesus changed all of us. We need to follow the Lord faithfully and continue to serve Him. We were lost. Now, we belong to the same Father.
Mengfei Li, CBN News.
케냐에 가뭄이 들어 많은 이들이 탈수와 굶주림으로 고통스러워하고 있습니다.
The drought devastated farming and crops in the community of Kinango. But CBN's Operation Blessing in Kenya stepped in to help feed them. Working with the International Christian Center, Mombasa, they delivered a truck full of emergency supplies. The food helped more than 300 families.
오늘 준비한 소식은 여기까지입니다. 저는 다음 주에 다시 찾아오겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.